watching Business Access TV.
Business Access TV.
Business Access.
Business Access TV.
Serious about business.
Crime, corruption, and criminal justice. AMCHAM, the American Chamber of Commerce, is shining a light on these topics here at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel in a luncheon that's looking at how these affect Jamaica's trade and investment potential. I'm Elon Parkinson. Let's take a look at the highlights.
One of the things that I realize is that having these forums, it provides us with an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to improve. And all members should give your organization a round of applause. Put your hands together for it. For weeks, I was talking about business unusual. For weeks, that was the last one on the economy that you guys had. And I was in cocktail conversation sounding smarter than I am just by virtue of having been in the room. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today. I'm going to apologize for the National Security Minister, Dr. Horace Chang. He did intend to be here, but he was called at the last minute to Parliament. I believe he has a parliamentary committee that he must be at, so they've summoned him. The numbers are important in these committees to make quorum and to participate in discussions at Gordon House, so he won't be with us today. The DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions, Paula Llewellyn, is here. Thank you very much for being here with us today, as is Dirk, the acting head of the Corruption Prosecution Division at the Integrity Commission. Always glad to have Professor Anthony Clayton, a respected criminologist, here with us today. Jason Fraser is the country rep of the USAID. Thank you very much, and looking forward to hearing their presentations later today. At this time, I'm going to invite Allison Peart, the president of AMCHAM of Jamaica, to give the official welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. You know, we look so officious and so quiet. It's very, very important business, but I'm hoping today you're going to learn a lot more. You're going to leave here understanding more about some of the issues and, more importantly, with some solutions. Because it's one thing to speak about our issues, but if we don't find a solution, we're just a talk shop. And I love Nationwide on the radio, but we don't just want to talk. We want to come up with some solutions. So as the president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Jamaica, we thought it very important. We talk about how wonderful the economy was. Our last session was business unusual. But if we have crime issues, if people don't feel, Jamaicans don't feel comfortable going about their daily lives, if our foreign investors don't feel comfortable, if our children, who are our future, have issues, where are we as a nation? So we thought it very important to bring together a panel that would engage in the dialogue about crime, corruption, criminal justice. How does it affect our trade and investment? Because it makes no sense to talk about our GDP growing or our debt to GDP if we're dying. It makes no sense if our future is tied to crime. So this dialogue is very, 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 very important, and I'm very happy you're here with us.
Okay, the question today is how much crime and corruption and a dysfunctional justice system are actually inhibiting the development of Jamaica and inward investment. Because we don't just have one problem, we have quite a complex array of problems. And it's quite hard to know how much we should attribute to any one of these and how much any one of these is contributing to what has historically been a very low rate of growth and significant difficulties in attracting inward investment and retaining domestic capital and retaining human capital. These are the headline ones. We have one of the highest rates of violence in the world. We have a large number, a significant number of gangs. About 80% of our homicide are gang-related. The rest are primarily domestic violence. So the fact that we have a large number of gangs is clearly a major factor in maintaining one of the world's highest levels of homicide. There are fundamental challenges still in our system of governance. As I'll be going on to say in a few minutes, we have people in public life who help to create this problem with gangs and high levels of violence, and that link has never been yet severed, and that is still a challenge that we have yet to face. What, of course, that does is it undermines the moral authority of government. If you have a situation where all the bad guys are out there and everybody in government is honest and competent, it's not really very difficult to deal with the problems of crime. The problem is when the boundaries between the two are blurred, and when you have criminals who are getting high-level political protection. At that point, it's much, much harder to deal with the issues. Of course, what that feeds is a culture of cynicism, low trust, and that has a great deal to do with sustaining a high level of violence. In any country where you see that people do not trust the police and do not trust the justice system, they're much more likely to have recourse to violence to solve their issues and disputes. So it's partly reflecting the fact that we've still got deep weaknesses in our system of governance. But let's put this in a little context. There's only one demographic for whom violence is the leading cause of premature morbidity, which is young males, late teens, early 20s. For every other demographic, it's actually cheeseburgers that are more likely to kill you. We've got issues with, like every other country, with steeply rising rates of non-communicable diseases. And we can't also forget the fact that we have perennial challenges with energy security, increasingly with water security, which is related, because years ago we made the decision that everybody must be on a piped water supply, which means that we're now committed to a program of pumping water up hillsides, which means that if our energy system goes down, our water system goes down too. In hindsight, perhaps that wasn't a very good decision. So we've got issues with energy, water security, and more generally food and access to resources. We live in a seismically active part of the world. We live in the hurricane belt. There's challenges with emerging exotic diseases, and of course we've got a background issue really serious now, as people have started to realize with climate change. You may have heard that this summer is the hottest ever recorded in Jamaica's history. And in fact, there's now real grounds for concern that we've gone past an irrevocable point, and that we will not ever revert back to the low temperatures of the past. So this is something that we may now have to make a permanent adjustment to.
One of our highest priorities of the U.S. government in Jamaica is to work with our counterparts to interdict Jamaican and Caribbean-based transnational criminal activity, including narcotics and arms trafficking, trafficking in persons, and financial fraud targeting U.S. citizens. The U.S. government has also invested heavily in supporting anti-corruption initiatives with the civil society and Jamaican government, as well as supported improvements in the justice system. In total, the U.S. government invests about $12 million in security-related programming annually, which does not include all the various partnerships and collaborations that our various U.S. government agencies have with their counterparts. In fact, USAID Jamaica just advertised a broad agency announcement to co-design our flagship community violence prevention activity with key stakeholders such as the government, academia, and private sector. This unique co-creation approach encourages key stakeholders to co-create and deliver the services that are vital to prevent youth crime and violence at the community level. Law enforcement and criminal justice are important to controlling crime, as we all know, and corruption. But we also have to address the underlying social challenges that both cause and contribute to crime. Within the broad range of U.S. cooperation on crime, and this is where USAID comes in, we partner with the government and civil society on a range of programs to address the root causes of crime in Jamaica. So in the area of community safety and security, and building upon past successes with community-based policing, USAID focuses on the strengthening of community-based and civil society organizations, the promotion of community-driven activities, the development of long-term champions of a culture of lawfulness, and the enhancement of ministries, departments, and agencies of the state to be more community-oriented institutions. In this way, we believe that we contribute to building safer communities, strengthening social cohesion, and improving civic engagement participation. USAID also works with holistic youth-friendly approaches that aims to assist at-risk youth in becoming active citizens through the engagement of different social, educational, behavioral, and recreational activities. This approach includes three main areas regarding youth involved in criminality: prevention, intervention, and rehabilitation, including diversion activities as alternatives to traditional incarceration for first-time offenders. Youth also develop skills through educational programs which introduce them to fundamental concepts in business, economics, individual accountability, and entrepreneurship. USAID expects that life skills and technical training will increase opportunities for at-risk youth to work within the legitimate economy, thereby reducing the likelihood of involvement in gang and criminal activity. In Jamaica, relationships with key public sector, private sector, and donor agency partners are being leveraged to create programs to build skills and to identify work options for youth. USAID also works in the youth remandee centers, which includes case management follow-up to facilitate at-risk youth acquiring job and education opportunities when they are released. In the area of corruption, the Combating Corruption in Jamaica project has not only built public demand for more effective action against corruption through awareness campaigns, but has also provided training to government and civil society partners to build capacity and increase advocacy. The project is expected to have an impact on the nation's capacity and the ability to effectively control instances of and attitudes towards corruption in general and political corruption in particular. So what's the role of the private sector in addressing the root causes? That's why we're all here today. Many of you are representing private sector organizations. How can the private sector be a key partner in addressing some of these root causes? Obviously, many of you are part of the community, and so you have an interest. Your companies are often affected by the high rates of crime and corruption. So it's important that government, international partners who support government, NGOs, and the private sector work together to address these issues. We've all been to various forums on issues surrounding crime in Jamaica. I think the private sector here needs to continue to ask itself what it is doing to address the issue. Clearly, advocacy is important to press for resources, accountability, and support in combating crime. But there's much more that can be done to invest in communities to make them safer and create opportunities for the next generation to be prosperous. Looking ahead, we welcome the opportunity to increase our engagement with the private sector on these challenges because of the energy and innovation that they typically bring to the table. USAID is a learning agency, and we are constantly exploring how to improve our work and increase our impact. So as we streamline our programs and look for new strategic partners, we invite the private sector to partner with us as we both work towards the common goal of helping Jamaicans thrive.
There's this sense of a godlike syndrome that during some transactions an oversight body must lap its tail or virtually hold its corner in the name of investment. There are different roles for each stakeholder. Each must stay in their lane and accept criticism when constructively made. On the contrary, ladies and gentlemen, Potential investors, in fact, should be happy that the business environment observes the rule of law and that democracy flourishes with built-in checks and balances. If I were an investor about to enter Jamaica, it's incumbent on me and my handlers to look out for red flags and indicators of the environment. I name a few on a list that is not exhaustive. 1, determine the role of the oversight body. It must be effective, efficient, fearless, and it must be respected. What, if any, comment does the oversight body have to say on a process or an investment opportunity that you wish to enter? The engagement, ladies and gentlemen, of investors and investor confidence, existing and thriving, must be viewed on a virtual 2-lane highway. That is a 2-way street with rules and guidelines being applicable. 2, does the police service support and protect local and non-Jamaican community members? Do they communicate with all persons? Are they accessible at all times? Maintain a presence that the visitor or citizen believes and recognizes that if they do wrong, they'll be detected. But lines of communication must always be in place. For too long in this blessed country, the notion exists that unless someone knows you and you not knowing them, nothing will happen. That needs to end. In a time of real emergency, the joke is told, unless you have on speed dial a member of the police force, the response time to a complaint is sometimes unacceptable. Another thing that I would think an investor would look for, there must be a criminal justice system that is efficient and effective, and we must congratulate the learned Chief Justice for the renaissance and the role of the DPP's office in the renaissance that is taking place now. But we must also have financial services, a banking system, healthcare facilities. They must be adequate, to name a few components. Importantly, ladies and gentlemen, on Jamaica's stock exchange record, Michael Reagan, writing in Bloomberg Business Week, January 18, 2019, states the Jamaican stock exchange is the world's best performing. Its outperformance over the past 5 years is even more striking. Jamaica's stocks have surged almost 300%, more than quadrupling the next best performing national benchmark and septupling the S&P Standard & Poor's 500's advance. I make bold to say that the very important successes must be highlighted, with all the negatives on crime and violence reported in the last 48 hours in Jamaica. Also, the awards in the tourism sector must also be celebrated. However, we must do better. Ladies and gentlemen, what are some of the solutions? Government agencies must work together all the time and set aside jealousies and petty matters which have no place in a professional setting. Interagency cooperation and collaboration must be emphasized and practiced. We must build bridges and stop tearing down, emasculating, and ridiculing persons. The fact that you do not agree is no reason to disrespect. Professionalism is non-negotiable. We must have a review of the timelines to review governance structures. Oftentimes, pieces of legislation give you 3 years to review a legislation. You see in 1 year, nothing is happening. The parliamentary caucus needs to do something about that. We must enhance whistleblowing regimes and encourage the discourse, changing the discourse to, in my words, informer for live. Stop saying informer for dead, informer for live. I must admit, I'm an informer. I'm a proud one. I'm an informer. Tell me something today, I'm going to tell the police tomorrow. We need to modernize the law enforcement units and bring outstanding laws into operation. We need public education to sensitize the world that the perception of corruption or actual is not a reflection of the overwhelming majority of law-abiding Jamaicans. We need to ensure that the police and our oversight bodies work to regain public trust. The police must maintain presence, not just in hotspots, but also generally. It will help to rebuild issues of insecurity. I pause here as I listen to Professor Clayton. In the last month, I visited Cayman. The police carry no guns. A year before, I went to Turks and Caicos. The police had no guns. I visited Grenada a few times. The police had no guns. They have their problems, but I felt safe. I am walking in this, my beloved country, and we're turning and looking behind us every minute. But our Caribbean neighbors, and Professor Clayton showed us the figures, I feel safe. We need to look at that. Ladies and gentlemen, as I close, I reiterate that the government of Jamaica, the ministries, the departments, the statutory bodies, to name a few, must work united to create that package, that which is seen by the outside world, with all the various components and elements that they look at, and which they consider, and which will have the effect to harness growth and encourage investor confidence. But most importantly, we must leave our partners with the belief that integrity is non-negotiable. Honesty is paramount, not by word of mouth, but by our actions. And despite our problems, crime and corruption, that they can and humbly should consider investing in our country to bring about change for good. Acknowledging that the improvement of the basic standards of life may have the effect of changing behavior, but I readily admit we can't legislate for good behavior.
In respect of what it takes to inspire confidence, I'm a plain speaker, and I will say, I believe that what is happening in our country, education is the key. I believe that a lot of our children, some of those who come from environments where they are victims of poor and dysfunctional parenting, we need to reintroduce civics in all its forms back within the schools, from the time of the basic school, because there are a lot of our children. People complain that, okay, are the schools not doing enough? But they may go to school, the teachers try their best, and they go back into an environment that is like a black hole of nothingness, because there's no value system, no values, positive values and attitudes. And yet if you take that child and you put that child in another environment, you have intervention, positive intervention, you would be surprised to see the beautiful diamond coming from the rough. So I'm really a big believer in education. Now, another pet peeve of mine is that, and I prosecute police officers, I do not subscribe to the throwing the baby with the bathwater approach. Everybody knows their functions best. But I am not a public official who believes, unless it is necessary in the interests of justice, to make gratuitous comments in terms of seeking to tear down my colleagues anywhere. And I am not into using speculation to put out there to join the call for crucify him, crucify her in the public domain, where you have the court of public opinion demanding, just like the little old ladies who were knitting at the time in the Tale of Two Cities and saying for the noblemen, chop off their heads. I am not into that. At the Director of Public Prosecutions Office, we deal with two things: the law and evidence. Personal emotion, personalities, we are not into it. So even if the court of public opinion or any other opinion would like to see the guillotined head of an individual on a platter, if there is no evidence to prosecute, to mount a viable prosecution, then as a matter of law, we have to say so. And I will say, and it's the first time I'm saying it publicly, first time, and I say it with the greatest of respect, that this is why on occasion, when I've been asked privately, I have registered privately a concern when you have no firewall between agencies that both investigate and prosecute. Because if you are not careful, you run away in the court of public opinion, and the court of law has to catch up. And by the time it gets to court, after a lot of reputational damage has been done, when you look at it and the defense counsel gets up and says, they are putting the prosecution in limine to prove what is there. The judge asks, and when you pare away what is there, there's nothing there as a matter of law. So sometimes in the court of public opinion, the members of the public would want to see one thing, but both the police and I know that in the court of law, it's either you have to have cogent, credible, reliable, admissible evidence. If you don't have it, then no matter how egregious the conduct of an individual is, then you don't have a case. Then you have to look at the second layer in terms of governance and accountability. And this is where public opinion, civil society can force the government of the day to make sure that all the particular oversight agencies, that they have teeth, that they are well structured, and that the will, the political will is there to make sure that the teeth are not rickety in the oversight agencies, but they can stand up. In other words, if you put a piece of cane in the mouth of the teeth of that oversight agency, the teeth won't come out. It is the cane that will suffer damage.
Riveting perspectives and indeed sobering statistics coming from the AMCHAM empaneled team here at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel. You're watching Business Access TV, serious about business.